What up, nerds? My name is Leslie Smith. Welcome to The Nerdy Narrative, a channel where I talk about all of the things that I read. Today is no different. On Fridays, I like to do a video about all of the things that I've been reading recently, what I've finished, what I'm still working on, a little bit about what I plan to read next. But before I jump into the books, if you are part of the Wine and Crime book club that I host here on the channel and in my Discord, I do have our 3 selections to vote for the month of September. So if you want to get your vote cast, make sure you check out the Clubhouse channel in the Nerdy Narrative Discord. The link is in the description down below. You have until the 15th to make your vote before the selection is made. This month, the Wine and Crime book club is reading Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. So if you haven't read this book and you want to join us, plenty of time to do so. The live show is not until the last Saturday of the month. Plus, we're just talking about it all throughout the month. This book club is just a read at your own pace. So anytime during the month you want to pick it up and reading, there's generally 1 to 2 people reading it. I typically wait until closer to the end of the month so I'm fresh and ready for the live show, but it's just whenever you want to read it. And if you've already read it and you just want to come in and join the conversation, you are more than welcome to do so. As always, I also want to give a huge thank you to the patrons of the Nerdy Narrative channel. Your generous support is what makes this channel what it is today, so thank you so very much. And now let's talk about what all I've been reading this week. Okay, let's start with the first book that I finished, Dead Man in a Ditch by Luke Arnold. It's the second book in the Fetch Phillips archive, and it is so good. I loved The Last Mile in Sunder City. It was a great book. But this one, wow, this one was just leveled up in so many different ways. The actual storyline, the plot felt more cohesive. The characters were just developed just a little bit more. It's really hard to describe, but if you're a constant reader where you've read an author's debut novel several times and then you read their follow-up and you can just see how they just continue to hone their craft and get better at what they do, that's exactly what happened here. It was unputdownable. So what can I tell you about this one that won't spoil book 1? So this is a series about Fetch Phillips, who is a man for hire. He's not a detective. He's just, you need a guy to do something, Fetch Phillips is your man. Both of these books take place in Sunder City, and this world used to have magic. But 6 years before the first book, there was an event called the Coda that happened that destroyed or drained all of the magic out of the world. Fetch isn't sure how it happened, but now people somehow have the wrong idea that he is looking for magic. It's rumored that he's the only one that can bring it back, which brings a few different gigs his way that are very interesting. Namely, the police hiring him to investigate a possible magical incident. It's so good. We continue to build upon the story that began in the first book. Plus we're still getting a look back into Fetch's history as well as the history of Sunder City and the world when they still have magic. The plot is a big deal for me in this one. It's very intriguing. I'm very invested in just this world. I want to know more about this world. One of the things I mentioned that Luke Arnold had gotten better at was character development. I cared a lot more about characters in this one, so much so that I actually cried twice. I'm definitely enjoying this little urban fantasy series, and yes, I have already made plans to read the 3rd book next month. Let's see, the next book that I finished here is Bitter Sun by Beth Lewis. This is a psychological thriller that just had hold of me. When I wasn't reading it, I was thinking about reading it, and I suffered so bad because I was reading Bitter Sun, Dead Man in a Ditch, and then I started The Well of Ascension. All 3 books were so good. I just wanted to sit down and read all 3 of them. And then finally, I just got to the last 100 pages in this one, and I sat down and finished it in one sitting because I had to know. It's about 4 children that are from a small farming community called Larson. It's the beginning of the summer of 1971. They go out to their fort that they've built on a neighboring farmer's property, but it's a part of the property he doesn't use, so nobody ever goes out there. They also dammed up a little bit of a stream that kind of made them a little lake that they could swim in. They go there after their last day of school. They make the grisly discovery of a dead female's body. You would think a small town in 1971, the discovery of a body would be a big deal in a small town. It wasn't, and the kids just couldn't understand why that was. Weren't this person's parents looking for them? Didn't they deserve to know that she had been found and what had happened to her? So because the sheriff doesn't seem to be actually trying to do his job, the children decide they're going to investigate. I know that I'm saying children are going to investigate. You're thinking perhaps Nancy Drew. No, this is a very dangerous and deadly situation that these kids are about to find themselves in, not only in regards to the body, but also their own personal lives. Each one comes from a different background and set of circumstances. Their personal journey, their development over this novel is just as compelling as the mystery. I spent an equal amount of time dying to know what happened to this girl and who killed her and how she ended up where she did, and also wanting to know more about these children's lives and what was going to happen to them, and just seeing them grow up. It was almost like a coming of age psychological thriller. It's just one that I want to read again and again, just for the character development at this point, because it was so good. Next up from the completed pile is I read the short story by Stephen King called Chattery Teeth from the Nightmares and Dreamscapes collection. This one I loved in a completely different way than I usually like these types of stories. I love when King takes a toy or an inanimate object that you might have played with as a child or have seen numerous times and just thought it was harmless, and makes it sinister. And in this one, oh man, I don't think I should tell you what was different about it that made me still love it, because it would be a dead giveaway as to what happens here. So I won't tell you that. I'll just say that I loved it. I am really enjoying this collection of short stories by Stephen King. I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. At this point, I'm still standing by this is going to be my favorite collection. Even though it had a couple of stories that were duds, the rest have been amazing in my opinion. All right, I think the only other completed read I actually read on my Kindle. I was very fortunate to receive the ARC for Crystal Lake Publishing's newest release, Wounds to Wishes. This is a collection of 3 novellas that will be out August 26th. It'll be in Kindle, paperback, and they are currently negotiating the rights for audio. This is volume 1 in their Dark Tide series. They're going to try to release 1 to 2 volumes, 3 novellas each month. I'm going to put down in the description box below the authors that they've got so far lined up if you want to take a look and see what you have coming. But this one had some heavy hitters. We had Chad Lutsky, Robert Ford, and John Bowden. I should also mention that each of the different collections are going to have different subgenres and themes. For instance, Wounds to Wishes is loosely being described as grief horror. The first novella in this collection is called The Strangest Twist Upon Her Lips by Chad Lutsky. It opens up with our main character, Brenton, who has discovered the body of his fiancée. She's committed suicide. Straight away, I'm pausing to think to myself, what could that possibly feel like? You're a few months away from marrying the love of your life, and you walk in and they've committed suicide. I just can't imagine. I know how excited I was in the months before Chris and I got married. I just couldn't wait. I counted the days. What could possibly dampen that joy to where she would commit suicide? And once I got past just trying to imagine how that would feel, the next thing I moved to, what could have transpired to have made her feel that her only option was to take her life. The first 2 pages, Chad Lutsky had me stopping in my tracks and putting myself in the main character's shoes. Once I was there with Brenton, I never left. I was by his side throughout this entire story. Chad Lutsky has an amazing ability to write human depth, just getting to the heart of the matter and just writing it in such a way that makes sense. This story, even when it got crazy, it made sense. It felt logical. I felt that I would be doing the same things that our main character Brenton was doing, and it was just an incredible journey. The next novella was My Only Sunshine by Robert Ford, and this one was more of a thriller. It had an element to it I would describe as supernatural. Our main character Caroline Jacobson has suffered a huge loss, the murder of her child, her only daughter. Because the police have had no leads in finding out who murdered her child, Caroline has basically walled herself off. She feels nothing. And one of her coworkers says, Caroline, here's a card. Here's somebody who helped me when my husband passed away. So Caroline decides to seek out this help, which leads to an event that then gets Caroline really digging into her daughter's murder and trying to get to the bottom of it. This one didn't go in any of the ways that I thought it was going to go. I, of course, was trying to figure it out along with Caroline. I did not. It was so good. The final novella in this collection was called Suey by John Bowden, and this one was the scariest of the three. The other two were horror, but not the kind that make you want to sleep with your light on. This one had a bit of a Lovecraftian element to it, which I love and hate at the same time. I love it, but then I hate it because it just makes me squirm. This one was so good. Our main character, Corbin, has walked out on his job. He used to be a caretaker for an older people's home in his town, and he just had enough. He made the mistake of working at one that was near where he grew up, and all of the people that are coming in are people that he knew, and it was just really hard on him to watch them waste away, their minds leaving, they don't remember him, and how hard it was to let them go. And he just walks out one day. The next day he receives a letter from a lawyer letting him know his grandfather passed away. Corbin decides he's going to pack up, go to his grandfather's house, and help sort through what's going to be donated and what's going to be sold. Corbin gets there, he's rummaging around through all the stuff, going through it, and he finds some notebooks where his grandfather had written down accounts and then also a journal. And so along with Corbin, we find out the history of the valley that this farm is in and what is expected of its residents in return for a good crop, a happy existence. I know I'm smiling, but this one caused me to have some weird dreams last night after I finished it. That's all I'm gonna say. An amazing collection to kick off this new series by Crystal Lake Publishing. I'll have Crystal Lake Publishing's website linked in the description box below. If they have the book listed on Amazon, I'll have that linked below as well. The last time I checked, it wasn't showing anywhere yet, so as soon as it's available, I'll add that link to the description box. I believe that takes care of all of my completed reads. What am I still working on? Well, I'm still plugging away at Well of Ascension. This one has its claws sunk into me because I'm trying to uncover who the spy is. There is a new Mistborn character in here that I don't know about that one. I also have a love-hate relationship with Vin. When this one started, I did not like her at all. And then there's a friendship that's occurred that I like, the friendship between her and this other character. So I'm invested in that. But Vin as just a character by herself, I don't really like her. What else I don't like are these covers. I just can't stand it. I know they're supposed to be like teen covers or YA covers, but I'm just not a fan. I'm not a fan. So having a good time working my way through this one. I hope the second half is just as good as the first half, and then maybe I'll have it finished and I can give you my overall thoughts next week. Other book that I started is called Hacked in Two, and it has two novellas, one by James G. Carlson, which is what I'm reading right now, called Red Falls. I've only read the first two chapters. The first chapter is exactly what I mentioned to y'all earlier that I loved in a horror thriller, and that is a taste of what is to come. Loved it. I was hooked. The second chapter, I met what I am thinking are going to be our main characters, June and Ezra. These two characters feel to me that they're very educated and intellectual. They're also largely politically motivated, and they have a conversation between the two of them and later with a guy that they're checking into the bread and breakfast, done very tastefully. I don't know how I feel about this one. I love the writing style. James G. Carlson is an amazing author. I love to read his work. And I love the first chapter. I just don't like reading about real life politics. You know, because I'm not interested in it, it makes me not interested in the characters, which I'm like, if they die, they die. We'll just have to wait and talk about it next week. I'll definitely get this one finished later this evening after filming, and we'll see what happens. I am very curious myself. Well, that will wrap up everything that I've read and what I'm still currently working on. What do I plan to read next? Well, I was having trouble. I had so many good books picked, or books that I'm interested in. I couldn't decide what I wanted to read next. So I went to my Patreon. I made a poll of the first line of 5 books that I was interested in reading, and I let them vote. And the winner, by a landslide, over half my patrons voted for this one, Ledge by TikTok sensation Stacey Maculin. This has been described as a spicy enemies to lovers fantasy romance. I know what you're thinking, but recently I read The Lady of the Mark by Alex Hansen, which was also a fantasy romance, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. So I'm excited to see how this one's going to treat me. After finishing The Lady of the Mark, I instantly wanted to read more fantasy stories like that. So we're gonna see how this one treats me and see if I'll be one of the readers joining the ranks of the fantasy romance subgenre. Ledge will be out September 13th, published by Angry Robot Books. I don't know much more than what I just told you. I read the book description once upon a time, but I have since forgotten it. But don't worry, next week when I check in, I'll tell you guys about my experience starting that one and how I'm liking it, and we'll see how that goes. In addition to Ledge, I'm going to start my next SPFBO book, which is going to be Where Blood Runs Gold by A.C. Cross. This is a fantasy western set in a world where dust can be flesh-eating. There's other stuff, but that is what keeps standing out to me. That is what really has me intrigued to read this one. I know that there is a sheriff here who experienced some sort of huge tragedy that's really affected him and had him sort of seal himself off from life until this family moves in town, and he feels very protective of them for some reason. They seem to be running from something. What are they running from? I don't know, friends. We'll find out, and I'll tell you all about it next week when I see you guys. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.